yod nun, being, is to understand. It's to say, take this idea of a will and formulating it, making it of a substance, like putting the letter mem in front of it makes it something solid, something tangible. So you're taking what was just this desire. The other interesting factor about that, the aleph is silent. So my friend saying, I can't believe there's a God. Why? Well, look what's going on. Look a little further. Look what this place is. Who put it there? I don't know. How did this place get here? He made the word Bereshit start with the letter Bet. Why doesn't it start with an aleph? The aleph is silent. There's a mystery of sod understanding just in the first two letters. The word Bereshit, the first letter of the book of Genesis, translated in the beginning, because the letter Bet means in. It's spelled Bet Resh Aleph Shin Yud Tav. The word Bereshit is the first word of the Bible. Where's the aleph? The aleph is silent. It says elsewhere in the scripture that he has made his glory known in what he made. The heavens declare the glory of Elohim. The earth resounds with his beauty and his wisdom and his dignity. Just look at the plants. Just look at the bugs. Just look at human beings. It speaks of the Creator, but the Creator is silent. And he's put this thin veil, as it were, between the waters. And he says, any of you guys that don't want to believe in me, okay. That's why the proverb says, only the fool says there is no Creator, there's no Elohim, there's no... Are you kidding me? How do you think this stuff got here? Very funny movie called Expelled. A few years back, Ben Stein was narrating this kind of like a documentary that tenured professors in the States and in England were getting kicked out, expelled, if they dared mention intelligent design. Not even talking about biblical stuff. And he finally tracked it back to the end of the movie. The arch atheist, Richard Dawkins, he finally gets an interview with the camera in there, and he gets Richard Dawkins to admit that this place had to come from some source. And he says, I don't know, maybe they're space aliens. They're just not God. They're just not God. So he's trying to push this theory to all the millions of students. There's no Creator, there's no God. Well, somebody made this place. This is not that guy. This doesn't identify. This is just Aleph. I'm the guy that made this. This could be a Martian for all we know. It just represents the guy that made this. And so when you look at that famous word I am, Ehyeh, Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey, if you know what the letters mean, you could say, okay, Yod is the hand of the Creator. So what the Creator has made, Hey is an expression. So you could say, that flower is what the Creator made. This is what the Creator made. He made the elements of what we see as wood and metal and air. So what we see manifest is the expression of the Aleph. Who's the Aleph? It's nothing more. We get no other information than the Aleph is the guy that made this place. So the guy that had the intention to put the bed into creation expressed his will, by what he made as we see it. But it's translated simply, I am. So to somebody say, well, I am, it must be a certain name, a certain reputation, a certain... All he's giving us is, I'm the guy who thought this up and made it so. That's literally what the word Ehyeh can be read as. So anybody who says, I refuse to believe that somebody put that there, well, somebody did, but he's probably a Martian or some guy from Andromeda Galaxy or somebody from some other time warp. It's just not God. Well, who do you think God is? You're inventing your own character, calling him God and saying, I don't believe in him. Wow. So we look back at the Aleph Bet and say, okay, he's the guy that made this happen. Put it into construct state. Then Gimel is the verb. So Bet basically is the noun, object in being, and Gimel is a verb. Now Dalet is, if you're on a road and you come to a Y intersection, you could go either that way or that way if you're heading that way. So Dalet's a door, but it's also a decision.
What does the Dalet look like?
The Paleo-Hebrew is drawn as a triangle.
Okay.
But it's number 4, which is where we get a 4 looking like that. That's a Dalet. Only we write the 4 like that, or like that. What I'm saying is that even our Arabic number 4 is a dalet. But what I'm saying is you're standing at the door, it's a decision. I'm going to show you the door. Do you want to stay or do you want to go out? That's a decision. Come to a fork in the road. That's a decision. So here, if you guys want to go to the store, you did that this morning, right? So, first you have the idea, hey, I want to go to the store. Okay, so you get in your car, there's the noun. And then you have to start your car up and start moving, driving. So there's the gimel. And then you have to look and say, where are we going? You have to make a decision on where to turn. But where do you turn? Hey, here, literally hey means the, here, it's to point at something. So this is a pointer, which is a suggestion, like looking at the sign. Then vav is a connector, or nail, which is to engage the decision and the recommendation with an absolute. It's connected. And then when you get where you're headed, you stop. That's Zion, so you stop. Zion is a weapon, which means to cut off. And then you go to Chet, which is the big box inside the fence. That's the box. That's like going to the store. It's actually a picture of a fence. And then you get a round bag, and you fill it up. That's the Tet, which is the round container. Tet being full is like a full basket. And then when you pay for it, you own it. And so that's the yod. That's your hand of acquisition. This is the first 10 letters. And it just makes logical sense. Boom, 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 boom. It's like dominoes. Nothing foreign, nothing strange, because this is just a little system run of, well, that's the way things work here.
Don't stop. You gotta keep going. We're missing the rest. I want all of the 22. That's really cool.
Okay, but before I go to the next half, I was going to show you something. I could go on. Okay, I'll get right to the middle. The next letter is a kaf, which is an open hand. So, you buy the stuff, you own it, and now you have it in your hands to come home and, sit at the table and lay it out, right? Okay, so that's kaf as a suffix. Okay, as a word, if I have a 10-letter word, when I start with an aleph, it basically means I am, and when you end in a yod as a suffix, it means my. So I can look at these 10 letters as being a package group, like a word that says, this is my stuff. Okay. Now, if I start another word, and kaf is the prefix letter, it means like or as. If I use kaf as a suffix letter of the first 10, that'll make it the 11th letter, and it basically means you or yours. So I could read kaf as the statement saying, this is my stuff, which I'm giving to you. Or I could read these first 10 letters that says, this is my concern, and now if we have a teeter-totter, and I got 10 things on one side, and this is number 11 and 12, say, kaf and lamed, then I'm going to have 10 more things on that side. And if one side, say his stuff, say these are his concern, then I'm going to suggest that these are now, if this is his concern, this is now having something to do with our concern.
That's awesome. That's just cool.
But still, the only way to validate this stuff,
But it would be 10 and 12, right? Not 10 and 10?
I'm saying that 11 and 12 are in the middle as the fulcrum.
Oh.
I'm saying that something about 11 and 12 acts as the fulcrum of the teeter-totter. Now, for what it's worth, the open hand kaf literally is lines. Fingers are lines, but a palm tree branch is also lines. But if I turn my hand sideways so that it looks like this, well, that's like lines of instruction. So I can see in that graphic as a hieroglyph, I can see this as lines of instruction. Well, that's a page of script. That's the Torah. Especially since lamed means teach and learn. Lamed literally means teach and learn. So Talmud is a disciple. Disciple is based on the word for discipline. So one who disciplines or conducts their life according to the teachings is the Talmudim disciples. Same word. So when people say, I had this guy ask me this question, I was in this Jewish bookstore, and I was getting a Tanakh, or asking him about one, and he said, oh, what do you want to do that? I'm learning Hebrew, and he says, I said, not the Talmud, but I'm trying to study the Torah, and he says, doesn't the Torah tell you to regard the Talmud? Trick question. See, in the Christian world, the word Talmud is, the Jews have a bunch of books they call the Talmud. They get it. It was written in Babylon. What happened was back down here, they never wrote it. The teachings, the discussions, we're recording this. We didn't record it, it would just be live, so they had all these live conversations. We're talking about where to put the vowel points, how do you conduct the understanding of the teachings, which is what the rabbi's job was, known as sages. Not a bad thing. Any Bible school is the same exact thing as Talmud or Pharisaical sage rabbi work. It's all the same stuff. The Christians got a bad association with it. But the point is, anytime you discuss anything at any of these levels, that's what the rabbis do. They just talk about it. And the smart ones are known as sages. Different than priests, that's the Sadduceical or the Aaron Levitical order of the Kohanim. So you got the Kohanim and the Pharisees, or the Sadducees and the Pharisees, or the priests and the sages. I mean, they're kind of like Republican and Democrat. You know, they're kind of two groups that kind of balance and conflict with each other all the time. The point is, if you go back and say, I'm going to look at these teachings and discipline myself, well, that's the Torah. So I can sit there and say Kaf and Lamed is basically the Torah, which doesn't mean law, it means instructions. But the word Torah, spelled Tav, Vav, Resh, He, this word or literally means light. If you spell it with Aleph, Vav, Resh, that's the word or like let there be light. Aleph and Tav are both prefix letters, but the word or is light, and this is to say express or reveal. So and Tav is a sign of the covenant. So I can say the word Torah literally is the covenant of light revealed. Or I could say the covenant revealed as light, as illuminating the covenant is the word Torah. But it's called law. He did away with the law, nailed the law to the cross. It's like the whole thing has been obliterated with even the regard in the heart, much less the regard in the mind. So the other interesting thing about the lamed drawn like this, it's the rudder of a ship. It's also the nose on your face. And you know, where your nose points, that's where you go. And the lamed is the teachings and learning. So the word for navigation, Hagah, Hey Gimel Hey, literally is rudder, steering wheel, helm, driving, but it's also to navigate, and it's also to spell words and think and meditate and ponder. It's all the word Hagah. And the word for goyim, Hey is a prefix letter meaning the. If you drop that off, Hey is the feminine suffix. If you take that and make it a masculine, goy, that's the word for nations. So the nations were separated according to their thinking and pondering based on their spelling of words. It all points back to say this entire language is built by Yahweh himself to show us this map. The whole thing is like this incredibly complex puzzle, this labyrinth, all pointing to the truth. And the whole thing is confirmed if you know the meanings of the letters. To comprehend and understand, which is one of the other letters down here, is the ayat. It's drawn as an eyeball. It's also a fruit with a seed within itself for self-replication. So within the language is a way to self-replicate and to add to the next generation and keep running and running. I mean, we could just run in so many tangents with what all this stuff means. But if you say ayin tav, I could read that, that's the word for time. If I write ayin dalet, that's the word for until. So Daniel...
Break down ayin tav.
Okay, I'll do that in one moment.
Okay.
But the significance of those two words is that Daniel, in Daniel 12:4, was told, hide the words and seal the book until ayin dalet, this is what he said, until the time of Kuf Sadi, which is translated as end. So in Daniel 12:4 it says, Daniel, the archangel Gabriel showed up and told Daniel, I have a job for you. So he's been sent from on high, and he's saying, I've got a job for you. You're now going to do this. You're going to hide the words. That's one verb, which is het tav mem and samek tav mem. This is the word for seal, and this is the word for hide, I believe. Hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Kufzadi. And so you read that thing, oh, the words are going to be hidden and sealed until the end of the world. It doesn't say that. He just says the time of the end. What if it's the time of the end of the curse? Daniel, hide the words and seal the book until the end. Well, samek is that engineered structure. It literally means a trellis, like a backbone with ribs. It's an engineered structural design. Well, that's the orthography of letters. Het is a box, like putting it into the store that we're talking down here, a container, and it literally means to seal or put a lid on it that can't be taken off. It's a picture of Excalibur, the sword, being stuck into a rock and nobody could pull it out until King Arthur was sent on a mission to go find a sword. I can't find, oh, there's a sword, pulls it out and runs over and says, here, where'd you get that sword? Same story. Hide the words and seal it until the time when it is allowed to be pulled out. And when it's pulled out, there's no putting it back. But how did he do it? If Daniel was going to put it into an enclosure by changing the orthography, change the shape of the letters. And so I think Daniel changed the shape of the paleo letters into the modern flame. So Ayin Tav, Ayin Tav and Ayin Dalet doesn't look like this. And you can say, what should that matter? What it mattered is the Archangel Gabriel came with a commission from heaven to tell Daniel to do something, and if Daniel did it, then it's sealed in heaven and on earth. It's not just that what Daniel did was so great, but he was empowered from on high. Whatever he did had to last until at least 2010, if I can presume to say that not only was the 10 tribes being lost until 2010, but also it had something to do with Daniel hiding the letters until 2010. And if that's the case, then to understand the Tav, if the letter Tav means the covenant, the sign, the mark, well, the letters themselves are marks and signs. I can do this. What does that sound like?
Some note.
A note.
But if I do, now you can tell me exactly what that sounds like.
If I could read music.
If I knew the language.
Here's, if middle C is here, then that would be F. So I can go over to the piano or a guitar and hit an F and I know exactly what it says. Here's my point. To draw the lines with a treble clef is a type of lamed and the lines are atop of kaf. This is the Torah and suddenly that symbol takes on identity because we've given it registration. It's music, but it works the same way. The only way to ayin the Tav is to go back to the Torah and put everything where it belongs.
Would that mean to understand the sign of the covenant?
Yes. And the letters I'm proposing are the signs of the covenant, the symbols that tell you what the covenant is. But the qualifier is ayin dalet. So here's the thing, dalet is a door. So if I can say that the letter ayin means to, if you look at the word ayin in the dictionary, it literally means to measure, weigh carefully, balance exactly, to see the obvious. So it's like the eye is the doorway into the heart and the soul. If you look at a spring, go to Yellowstone, you know, they've hot these hot pools, and from the depths of the volcanic heart comes these colors and the fountain of Old Faithful and all. So what I'm saying is that is the meaning of the letter ayin. So if you were to look at the depth of each letter, that's what we're doing by looking at the meanings of all these letters. How do you ayin the dalet?
Understand.
What door? Two considerations. One is 4 times, that's a dalet. He told us that he was going to crank up the curse by 7. Do you understand what that means? But we've never been told that. Where's the other door? Where's the world's most famous door? Who said that? Yeshua said he was the door. But the Jews don't know that, because the Jews have been lied to by their sages to say he's a scoundrel who's burning in hell and excrement right at this very moment. It's like, what? That's all the Jews know of him. They've been lied to. Yeshua claimed to be the door. Well, how do you iron the door? If you think that the Christian Jesus took away the Moedim, took away the Sabbath day, took away the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, you got the wrong guy. But here's the thing. So let's just say this is self-referential of Yeshua. So Yod-Heh-Vav Shin Ayin, Yahu Shah. Yeshua, you put a dot there and it would be, Shua means to cry out for help. Anyway, so to call his name Yeshua, here's the point. If the Aleph represents coming from the Ayin, which is, if this is the creation of the universe, matter, so if this is the cosmos, say, at Bet, then he who is from beyond somehow is going to put himself into a construct state of matter, being in the form of an embryo, gimmeling, this is the shape of a boomerang, traveling to Dalet Earth. Now, how is Dalet Earth? I think of it as you got earth, air, fire, water. Summer, winter, spring, fall. North, south, east, west. So fourness speaks of earthiness, just as a metaphorical sort of abstract. Hey, looking like, appearing as Vav, the man. Now to read the letters backwards. To show man the door of getting back to the house of the Father. Because we got kicked out and divorced and thrown away and got lost. So he came down in the form of a man to reveal to man the way to get back to the house of the Father. But this man would also be distinguished. So the letter Zion is a picture of an officer's hat. It's like an officer has a ceremonial sword and a badge, just to be distinguished with weapons. But he was distinguished with the Roman weapons of the crown of thorns and the whip that ripped open his back. And when Pilate said, Ecce homo, or behold this man, Hey is essentially the word behold. He was the man, and the word Zion, or Zion Hey, or Zion Aleph Tav, literally means this. So if you spell a word Zion Aleph Tav, it literally means this as a word, exclamation point. Zion Hey means the same thing. So to say this Aleph Tav, this Yeshua, is this specific man put to this specific weapon, and when Pilate said, behold, he was giving a fulfillment of prophecy. If the Hebrew alphabet is a prophecy, when Pilate said, behold this man, this was it. And then he put him into a tomb, and then he put the round rock in front of it and sealed it with a Roman seal. But Yeshua said, I have done this myself. No man takes my life from me. So he, by his own hand, held the door shut in the tomb when he was dead. Well, what is Bet Gimel Dalet? The word spelled Bet Gimel Dalet is the word baged, where we get the word bagged or baggy, which is loose, baggy clothing, which means to camouflage or deceive or beguile or to act treacherously. Act treacherously, why would he do that? He came in disguise, camouflaged as a man who would be put to the weapon and entombed so that he could show man and make provision for the men who were lost to get their way back to the house of the Father, which had been cut off without access because of our decrepit hearts. That, Yeshua, and the word spelled Kaf Lamed is the word all. The word spelled Yod Kaf Lamed means to have power and capacity to prevail and contain it all. So he came down because it's the Torah. In the Torah, the Kaf Lamed is the instructions to give us the capacity and power to contain it all. So for people who say, oh, we can't do it, never could, he never intended us for, that's not true. We've been lied to even about that. The word, if you add the letter Mem, the word spelled Kaf Lamed Mem means put to shame and disgrace and humbled with reproach. So he who came down, his reputation ever since then has been scorn and derision, which is even his reputation among the Yahudim today is scorn, derision, reproach, hatred. anathema. But he had to stay in that tomb, according to prophecy, 3 days and 3 nights. So if Het Yod is being put into the tomb, there has to be a package of 3 days and 3 nights, or 3 things. So you have Kaf Lamed, that's 1, Mem Nun is 2, and then Samek Ayin Pei is 3, which we can elaborate in a minute. But then Zadi is a picture of the resurrection. Zadi is a sprout. Zadi lines up in this pattern with the Ark of the Covenant, and in the Ark of the Covenant was Aaron's rod that budded. It was a dead stick. He used it to walk around with. He threw it down and it became a stake. But at this occasion, in the book of Numbers, they took all the sticks of the leaders of the tribes, and overnight it budded, sprouted, put out leaves and fruit. Are we still on? We're still taking, still working?
We are, we're just not getting to the very bottom there.
Oh, that's okay. The point is, this sprout having correlation to the Ark of the Covenant with Aaron's rod that budded is a picture of Yeshua rising out of the grave after 3 days and 3 nights. The pattern is in here. Here's Pesach, where he's put into the tomb. You got unleavened bread, Shavuot, then the fall feast of Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeret is a picture of the sprouting back to life. And then after the Zadi, going up here, after the Zadi is the letter Kuf. The letter Kuf is the rising up, the word Kom, Kumiori, arise and shine. Hamakom is the place. So Kuf is to rise up, but it's also to plant down. So this, and it also means behind the head, or the wake that follows, or in the future, it's drawn this way, is the sun on the horizon. Our letter Q. So the point is, Yeshua, after he resurrected, a few days later, he ascended into heaven, and a long time in the future, the word kof means monkey, so like a monkey just reaches out and grabs onto something, real far away, or with his tail to the back of the head, it's in the distant future. In the distant future, he's going to come back and will touch down to the exact same place. That's all a picture of the letter Kuf. And then, when he comes back, he's not going to be Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant, the man put to this weapon, but he will be Resh, the exalted Melech HaMelechim, the King of Kings, and Sheen, El Shaddai, teeth and fire. He's going to obliterate his enemies once and for all and give all the provisions to his people, which we just read out. It was a picture of what's happening in Zephaniah 3:8. He's going to assemble nations, wipe them out, and bestow the benevolences. So the Sheen is drawn as either sharp teeth of fire devouring, or it's drawn sometimes like this, which would be the Femalian form of nourishing and providing for the nutrition of its offspring, the breasted one. Shad means breast. So the point is that Sheen can be drawn either of the 2 ways. Tav, that's the terms of the covenant. That's the finality, the conclusion. So to say the ayin the tav, you have to understand each one of the letters in the context of ayining the dalet, which is Yeshua claiming to be the door. So the door of understanding is to realize that every one of these letters has to do with Yeshua, who validates the 22 letters. That's why I don't give a regard to the ayin letter. Well, that Jeff Better talks about being the phantom 23rd letter. You don't need the ayin. It fits with the 22. David only used the 22 in Psalms 119, and the pattern fits with the 22. And even though other letters slipped in, well, so what? He changed all the languages. Other stuff is slipped in all over the place. It doesn't take away from the original 22. Even if there was an ancient form, doesn't really matter. So here's my point. To say that the Hebrew alphabet was derived by Canaanites giving worship and homage to, like for example, there's this one lady on the internet, forget her name, one of the world's greatest linguistic scholars. She said they found this little sphinx in this cave back in Egypt, and it says something about Hathor, like, oh Hathor, you're so wonderful. And it was written in Egyptian hieroglyphics and in Canaanite Paleo-Hebrew, which means, she said, it must be that the Canaanites that were there working in the mine were enamored by, oh wow, those Egyptians, they write love letters to their goddess. We don't know how to write. Hey, why don't we invent some writing so that we can write love letters to our goddess too? So this is what she's saying. So the Canaanite miners concocted the Hebrew alphabet so that they could write love letters to their goddess. How does that fit Yahweh's covenant with his people? How does that fit Yeshua being the Ayin Tav and Ayin Dalet? So if you Ayin Tav and Ayin Dalet, there is no Hathor. There is no Odin. There is no Molech or anybody else. It's Yod He Vav He, and he's the guy in these letters. So for Miles Jones to say he eliminated the pictographic value from the letters, it's not true. I just showed you what they were. Here, Kaf Lamed means he will have the power to prevail and contain it all. Mem Nun is where we get the word manna. That means, where does this come from? What's going on here? Well, Mem is chaos, but it's also a womb. So he was put into the tomb, and that tomb only served as a womb from which Nun he would resprout unto being, I'm the vine and you're the branches, Somek. He said, you stay plugged into me and bear fruit, and this thing is going to be glorious. And if you don't bear fruit, my father, the husbandman, will cut off the branches and throw them into the fire. That's the Somek. The Ayin is the balanced scales. And he says, as long as you guys bear bad fruit and have no regard of my stuff, then the balance of the scales is that your enemies get to prevail. But when you guys decide to come back to the covenant and do what I said, bearing good fruit, then your enemies are going down. Zephaniah 3:8. That's the teeter-totter. That's the balancing of scales. Pay the open mouth. If you look at Matthew 6, why would he say this? Why would it say this? He said, sing the multitudes. He went up unto the mountain, the hilltop, and he sat down and he opened his mouth. And he taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit. Why would it say he opened his mouth? That's a very odd thing to say. He sat down and opened his mouth? But the word spelled Pei-Zadi, literally, the word spelled Pei-Zadi means open mouth. It's pronounced as a P and a TZ, so it's where we get the word Patzah. And it means to explode or to detonate or to scatter or to, like a dandelion head. The more we elaborate on this, the more we can see all kinds of beautiful pictures in here. But to sit there and say he opened his mouth, if we were trying to follow a chronology of time through here, this restoration of the language is the open mouth, the blossoming of that which had been closed. This has been closed for 2,730 years, and right now we're at this exploding blossoming of the open mouth of Yahweh, our Elohim. The world has never seen this before. Even before the flood at the Tower of Babel, Nimrod got in there and just... And before that there was like Noah and his sons. There wasn't much going on. The world has never seen where we are. It's incredible where we are. The explosive open mouth, and right after that, I could say, well, this kuf represents Yeshua rising up and coming back. But just like the video we saw last night, they were showing, the sacral fluid going to the sacrum and the pituitary. He modeled human physiology according to the same pattern that's in his words, which is in Yeshua, which is in the history of the people of Israel. It's a fractal pattern. It's all the same thing. It's validation, validation, validation. So they're not putting on the video saying, hey, the story of Jesus isn't true, but the story of Jesus is a metaphor of human physiology and brainial metabolism. It's like, it's all the same thing. It's the same pattern. You see it repeated constantly, which proves it. It doesn't diminish it. It proves it. And so if we can plug ourselves into the equation, we are right here. And so Kuf, as he ascended, we could say, but the model, he said, if we turn back to his ways and do what he said, we, his people, will ascend. And he's going to smash our oppressors and our jailers that have been empowered because we didn't. When I say we, I'm talking about our forefathers. So we stand right here at the door of the possible opening of the promised Messiah, Mashiach, the millennium of his favor. And then you say, with these eyes, I doubt and Todd, you go back and you read all through the scripture and you see, it's all over the place. He promised a restoration of his favor to his people. No more will they despise you. No more will the land refuse to yield its fruit. No more will you be struggling, oh, where is our God? It's all been under the curse. But we haven't had eyes to see because we were kept in the blinders of closed eyes. The word einzadi is closed eyes, or it also means to take counsel and have your eyes open, because the Hebrew words mean both things. So because of the era of einzadi, we haven't seen this. But now we're in the era of pezadi, and I choose to believe this is true. So Caleb and Joshua and 10 other spies went into the land to check things out, and they go, whew, these giants are huge. Their weapons are really sharp. They've got iron chariots and walls that are insurmountable. There's no way. Joshua and Caleb said, we don't have to figure this out. He said that he would make the way. Yahweh. He would take them out, and we will eat the food off their table, and we will live in the houses that they built, and we will drink the wine from the vineyard they planted. It's not up to us. So we can sit here. I was just at a conference listening, not speaking, at a conference with Stephen Ben-Nun and L.A. Marzulli. And they were telling us how big the giants were. They were telling us how formidable these walls were. They were telling us how impossible and what tribulation is about to come upon us. If the tribulation is coming on anybody, wait a minute now, who did Zephaniah 3:8 say it was upon?
The assembled nations.
The assembled nations. That's not Yahweh doing it to his people. That's Yahweh doing it to the assembled nations who were in opposition to him. If you look at Isaiah 13, Yahweh's going to call in. This is really a kind of a trip to read Isaiah 13, the first 15 verses. You might as well do this. Sure, why not? Imagine yourself as the director of a movie. You're going to orchestrate this to film it. How would you stage this? You got it there? Now, don't read the first verse. I'll tell you what the first verse says, but the first verse kind of throws it aside.
13?
Isaiah 13. The first verse says, this is concerning a prophecy of Babylon, and Babylon's going to be overwhelmed by Media Persia, which is a historical event. That's when, Darius came in and took out Nebuchadnezzar and all, and not Nebuchadnezzar was gone, but the kingdom that Nebuchadnezzar had set up was overrun by the Medes and Persians. But forget that staging for a minute, because we could look at that as an event in ancient history, but we could look at it as a model type, part of the fractal pattern again, where Yahweh had this one kingdom. For example, in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and in it, Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold, Media Persia was the arms of silver, Greece was the midsection of brass, and Rome was the legs of iron, and then there was another kingdom of blend of iron and clay that was the feet. We could go on to that with another part of the story, but what I'm saying is, if you look at head of gold, what's a head? That's the Rosh, that's the top, but what's going on? There's intellect, there's intelligence, there's thinking and learning and science. What came out of Babylon? That stuff. Media Persia, arms. Well, what's arms? Well, you could have scales, which has to do with economy, and you could have armaments that has to do with military. So there's something about economics and military in here. What about Greece? Culture, having to do with sports and entertainment and philosophy and those kind of things. What about legs of what came out of Rome? Well, you got politics and religion. You had Islam and Christianity both came out of Rome. What about the feet mixed with clay? When that statue goes down, is it just a chronology of fractioned history? I mean, history was this, then this, then this. What if at the end it's an amalgamation of all of them? Well, that's kind of the United States, Greco-Roman culture of the Western Hemisphere is what it looks like, is this, all these things blended together, which the USA happens to be the epitome of, iron mixed with clay. What is, well, clay was made out of earth, which is humans. Up until the revolutions of the 17 and 1800s, the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, American Revolution, democracy was an evil word. democracy was putting the power in the hands of the people. The monarchs, those are the ones that ruled, and democracy was quite a revolution of an overthrow of the whole concept. So the idea that the power was in the people, which is a democratic, all through the 70s, it's like, let's make the world safe for democracy. That's kind of a picture of feet mixed with clay. Democracy, it didn't ever happen before. That's kind of like its own new stage of development. And then this stone hits, comes out of nowhere, hits the feet mixed with clay, and the whole statue topples over, smashes, turns to dust, is dissipated by the ruach, the wind, and no trace is found of it. And that stone then fills the earth, it says, not the by and by kingdom of heaven, but it becomes, as it were, the messianic kingdom, and it will not yield its sovereignty to another. Means that it could be read that it's an earthly kingdom that will not be ever taken over by any other kingdom, like Babylon followed by Media Persia, followed by Greece, followed by Rome, followed by democracy, in which case you can look at it and say, well, what's an ebon? What is this ebon stone that hits the feet? Well, Aleph Bet Nun is ebon. Aleph Bet, as we talked about before, is the will of the Father. Bet Nun is the Son doing, Nun is the action letter, doing the manifestation of the Father's will. Yeshua said, I only do what I see the Father doing. I only say what I hear him saying. So you could say the ebon stone could be deciphered as saying, when Yahweh's people, as a good son, does the walking out and manifesting the will of the Father, that's the stone. And if it impacts the feet, the word for feet and leg is regal, resh gimel, this doesn't work, resh gimel lamed, and the word regal, literally, resh gimel lamed is where we get the word regal, which is where we get the word regulation. And according to Isaac Mosesson, if you flip those two letters to where you get RLG, you get the word relegate and religion. And regalia. So the relegated religion of the regalia of the regal authority, well, that's like the politics and culture, which looks like holidays. That's the regalia of the year, relegated regard of the culture. So when we turn back as the Ben of Ab and keep the Moedim instead of the cultural holidays, we are impacting the culture, knocking down this entire thing. It's like, well, that's a good reason to study the ancient Hebrew and to incorporate the festivals, the ceremonies, the celebration of the Moedim, because it's going to knock down that statue. That's what we were talking about in the car on the way from the airport. Us just keeping the day of Shabbat and the Moedim are the secret sewed weapon that he gave his people, and it's been lost for 2,730 years. I think David figured this out, which is why he had got the Ark of the Covenant back and sat there and had worshipers, musicians, 24/7, and praises going up. It's like the window of heaven opened, the blessings poured out, and David figured out a way to stick your foot in the window or something, stick a stick in there, keep it open, and it just started pouring out to where it says in the days of Solomon, silver and gold was as common as sticks and stones. I mean, just a flood. And Solomon didn't have to pick up a gun to go steal it from anybody like what the Spanish did. Or the U.S. or anybody else. I'm not pointing the finger at the Spanish. But what I'm saying is, this is Yahweh's business. This is all Yahweh's business. And we have never seen it throughout the history of the world. But we have a shot at it right now. Because the same prayer that Daniel did when he realized it had been that it had been 70 years, he did that for the southern kingdom. So we could look at it and say, well, then somebody should do that for the northern kingdom and let the people come back, right? I mean, if that's what Yahweh wants to hear, there's even a verse that says, when you come back, take words with you and say, we're not offering the bulls of sacrifice, we're offering the bulls of our lips. We should say these things. So wouldn't it be great if, like in 2010, somebody maybe offered up a prayer like Daniel did to bring us back? There's an interesting little story. The year is supposed to start, he says, let this be the beginning of months for you in Aviv, which is right now, springtime. So there's this track of 7 festivals, ending with Shemini Atzeret. And that's like this little calendar, mini calendar, the 7 Moedim. So you could say, at the end of the, in fact, when people were going to be let free at the end of the 7-year cycle, or the end of the 50-year cycle, it was on Yom Kippur, wasn't it? That was the release date for people that had sold themselves into bondage. I think that's what it was. So in the fall, it's called the Rosh Hashanah, is the turning of the year, the head of the year. It's because that's when political and financial things were conducted. But this kind of a ceremonial fiscal New Year. They still call it New Year then. But the Jews still today don't necessarily regard, at least overtly, that Aviv, he said, this will be the beginning of months. What I'm saying is, at the beginning is Aviv, that's now, and there's a kind of end of the fiscal year in the fall feast. So Shemini Atzeret of 2010 is kind of like this pinnacle of the end of the official curse. And if you have a regard for sunset, then it's like, boy, sunset of Shemini Atzeret at 2010. Now that would have been a great day. Me and 3 of the guys went to Shiloh in Israel at Shemini Atzeret at sunset and stood at the place of the altar of incense where the Mishkan used to stand and offered up that prayer for the northern 10 tribes. We were there and did that. It wasn't on purpose, it just happened. It was incredible. Me and Todd Bennett and Jamie Louie and Daryl, I forget his last name, the 4 of us stood there. And there was this feeling of compelling. The Mishkan stood there for 500 years, 600 years or something, and Yahweh ripped it apart. And the word Ichabod, the glory has departed, and then it was sent to Jerusalem. But that represents, that Mishkan represents, it's up in the northern kingdom, it represents that the northern kingdom turned their backs and went astray and never came back for all these years. And that day, at sunset, Shemini Atzeret, we stood there, and the altar of incense, you can tell right where it stood. There was the Ark of the Covenant, there's the altar of incense, if it's accurate. According to Andrew Hoy, there's a different model. But the point is, it's a rectangular pattern. There was the gate. Here would have been the altar of sacrifice. Here would have been the laver. Here would have been the covered place. Menorah, table of showbread. Right here, the altar of incense. Right there, a pile of stones where would have been the Ark of the Covenant. Jamie sat on the pile of stones and tried to call his girlfriend on the phone, and the phone wouldn't work. But a couple steps in front where the altar of incense would be, like communication, pay the open mouth. Oh, there it worked. Why would that be? I don't know, but we stood at where the altar of incense would, the incense representing the prayers of the saints. And we stood there, the 4 of us. It was all spontaneous. I choose to believe that's true. I choose to believe, like Solomon and Joshua and Caleb, that because Yahweh said it, it's true, let's count on it, and let's proceed as if it was true. And there's something about the disposition of our heart to regard these matters and go for it. David was told. David was struggling against Saul. He had these Philistines, and David had this guy come in, this prophet, and say, hey, Yahweh is giving you a promise that your offspring will sit on the throne forever. Never will there cease to be a man sitting on the throne of Israel, which is why the stone of, what do you call it, when your coronation went from Israel with Jeremiah to Ireland, to Scotland, to England, and they still coronate people on that throne because the English monarchs are the offspring of the lineage of David, even till to this day. The point is, when David was told that, he goes, I can't lose. He can't kill me. I'm bulletproof. And it said the very next verse, he went out and he conquered all these nations. Boom, 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 boom. Why? Because he had that confidence. He went out knowing this to be a true promise from Elohim, and he's just going to go for it. Joshua and Caleb had that attitude, and they were the 2 that got into the land, and they took over the castles of the giants sitting on the hill. In the book of Joshua, it says, when Judah came into the land, they conquered the giants in the mountains because Yahweh was with them. But the giants of the valleys had iron chariots, and so Yahweh couldn't help them. Why couldn't Yahweh help them? They had iron chariots. What does he care about iron chariots? That's like saying they got F-16s. You read the words iron chariots as Merkabah, Brazil, and you put the letters in, I read, I'd have to sit there and figure it out again, but Brazil, literally, like the country, is the word for iron, and Merkabah is the name of the Israeli tanks today, is the word for chariots. But you can see in the letters that it says the same way that you'd go to a water tank, lift it and pour out and drain out all the water. That's the picture. When the Israelites saw the iron chariots, and then the word is like astoundingly, their confidence, their strength drained out. Astoundingly, because Yahweh had just saved them from the giants in the mountains. When they saw the iron chariots, their hearts melted and drained out. So Yahweh couldn't help them. It won't tell you that at the Peshat level. It'll just tell you the story. But you read a little deeper into the words and you realize they brought it on themselves because of their lack of confidence in Yahweh's word. When David had confidence, he prevailed. When Joshua and Caleb had confidence, they prevailed. That's the model. If we choose to believe that these letters are the words of Yahuwah, they're not Canaanite deities. They're not Egyptian hieroglyphs. They are embodied by the arrival, crucifixion, trial and crucifixion, internment, resurrection, going away to prepare a place and coming back of Yeshua himself. Why don't the Jews see this? They choose to believe they have no Messiah. If they chose to believe that their Messiah had to follow the story, but he offers them restitution of being in his hands, there's no kicking out the Jews. They're one of the brothers of the 12 tribes. It is nothing anti-Jew. The point is, we can choose to believe that we stand right here at the breaking open, the patzah of these words of Yahweh's favor, and the whole world's about to become a different place. And for us, learning and teaching this Hebrew, and sitting down on Shabbat, and regarding this moed of unleavened bread, will change the world because it sends out a resonance, a vibration, a frequency that has to affect all creation. Because only Yahweh's people can have this effect to tip the teeter-totter. And I could show you numerous other places where the teeter-totter is referenced. Once you know how to read these words, once you know how to Ayin Tav, according to Ayin Dalet, the whole book opens up. And you'll never see it in English, and you'll never see it in Greek, you'll never see it in Latin, and you might not even see it in modern Hebrew. Although the Jews see something, they don't see this, otherwise they'd see Yeshua. Anyway, that's why we're so fanatic about the alphabet.
Seriously.
It's kind of a sad time in a way too, because your families aren't all with you on something like this. And so you better be very vocal to be able to talk to them, at least let them know that this is coming along.
Well, that's why doing this video. The reason for the video isn't to say, hey, look at me, I'm on the internet. Whatever, phooey. It's all about, see, if you just took a snapshot of this, it's like blah, blah, whatever. Who's going to read that? It's unintelligible.
Yeah.
But so then little things like what Rebecca's doing, where she writes these things up, and Sally in the little video that we did, and what Sarah's doing, is to try to make this intelligible. So I'm hoping that the stuff like you three girls are doing is maybe more comprehensible to some people than anything I might say. Maybe they can hear you if they can't hear me. Because it's a different voice, a different approach, you might say, a different way of articulating it. Anyway, just for the sake of the video, any questions? Or we could turn that off and just take a breath for a moment. I appreciate it.
Take a breath.
Take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we can say, what did you learn? You learned, wait a minute, before you turn it off. Nancy learned how to speak some Hebrew today. What was it? Let's say it all together. Odulawaki tov, ki le'olam chazdo. Odulawaki tov, ki le'olam chazdo. Give thanks to Yahweh, for He is good, for His mercy endures forever. Hodu, 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 hodu. Hodu layawaki tov. Hodu, 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 hodu. Hodu layawaki 136, that's what he says. When Solomon was inaugurating the temple, that's what he proclaimed. And other Psalms as well, it's in there as the greatest thing that we can say. Give thanks to Yahweh for His goodness, His tender loving kindness, His mercy endures forever. It cannot come to an end, it cannot fail, and it will blossom as His seed carries the genetic code. It must. This world cannot end till this is manifest, and by us doing this, we're just watering the seed. I expect to see it bloom, and it could be imminently overnight, like Aaron's rod that budded. Zadi! Bam! I expect to see this any day. Shalom. Can hit the button off.
Turn off the thingy.
Right hand side, red button, under the
Scrunchie?
scrunchie. There you go.